Senate Concurrent Resolution 6 in memoriam William E Connor M.D., 1921-2009.
Recognize Senator Shields.
Humble servant. Madam President, permission to use the visual aid?
Without objection.
Colleagues, this is my daughter's favorite book, Charlotte's Web. Last night we were reading the chapter where Charlotte spins the word humble into her web in a selfless act to save a spring pig named Wilbur. My daughter and I were reading the chapter and she asked me, "Daddy, what's humble mean?" I paused. In God's truth, I immediately pictured in my mind the kind, humble, thoughtful face of my friend, Dr. Bill Connor, the remarkable OHSU physician, researcher, teacher, activist, and humble servant. Today, I'll be talking briefly about being humble and Dr. Bill Connor's web and all those that he touched. And I'm honored today to ask you to join me in bestowing this body's highest honor, our highest honor, on Dr. Bill Connor, a humble servant who served Oregon and indeed humanity so well. And I'm not the only one who thinks of the word humble when they think of Bill Connor. I asked my wife just last night to tell me about Bill Connor, and she said, quote, "He was such a kind, loving, humble man." Bill got to know my wife, Shelda Holmes, through their work on replacing Oregon's death penalty. He helped her get into OHSU's School of Nursing. And my wife told me, she said, "Bill always took time for me. When I asked for a letter of recommendation for OHSU's nursing school, he didn't just write a letter. He asked me to come over to the house and meet for a cup of coffee around the dinner table. He asked me pointed, caring questions about what kind of medicine I really wanted to practice. And after we talked for hours about my passion for wellness," my wife said, "and wellness for the whole person," he said, "You know, I think you should definitely go to nursing school." And that's not easy for a physician, I understand. And my wife was so grateful that as busy as he was that night, he took out his typewriter and commenced writing a letter of recommendation for her. He was a humble servant for my wife, and Bill Connor was a humble servant that touched so many other lives, including the patients that my wife now provides health care to. A humble servant. In the Oregonian obituary from 2009, his colleague, Dr. Robert Steiner, who is with us today, also called Bill humble. Though he had many reasons for pride, Bill had many reasons for pride. In that obituary, reporter Katie Muldoon wrote, "Bill Connor was known as an endlessly curious, energetic, and gentle-mannered researcher at Oregon Health and Sciences University, where he had practiced since 1975. Not only did he discover the rare artery-clogging genetic disease called something in 1974, he also published nearly 400 research articles over his career, with many more in the pipeline. Much of his work focused on how omega-3 fatty acids, such as fish oil, salmon oil, may help prevent heart attacks. Dr. Connor also demonstrated omega-3's nutritional value for infants, which led manufacturers to improve infant formulas." Now, his work on salmon oils, in many ways, was not only an improvement to health, but really was an economic development tool for the state of Oregon and our great fisheries. He continued mining data even in his final weeks as he investigated the relationship between antioxidants and macular degeneration. His colleague said, quote, "He had a lot to brag about," and this is Dr. Steiner, who's with us today from OHSU. "He had a lot to brag about and could have developed a very large ego, but Bill wasn't like that. said Dr. Robert Steiner, an OHSU pediatric research professor who often collaborated with Bill Connor. He was a very unassuming man, very humble and modest, very humble and modest. But he had a lot to be proud of. Bill and Sonia Connor, who I'm very pleased to have with me here, along with granddaughter Jessica, were among the first to argue for links between nutrition and disease, and they were instrumental in developing the cholesterol hypothesis. But my personal experience with Bill, I remember calling Bill in the evening one time in the 1990s, thinking that he was at home, and he always made time for me. But this one time he said, you know, Chip, my son and I are actually with a patient here at the free clinic in Northeast Portland, so I can't talk to you right now. Could I call you back in about 2 hours? And I think that says a lot about his life, that this very accomplished Southwest Portland physician had such a reach and such a touch on our state that he did so much great things in what eventually became my district across the river in some of the most poverty-stricken areas of Northeast Portland. I think it says a lot about him. His son Chris is here today on the side aisle, daughter-in-law Regina Connor on the side aisle, Zach Connor, grandson, Patrick Connor, grandson, Gabriel Connor, grandson, and of course I already mentioned Jessica, who is here with Sonia. There are also many people who worked with him at OHSU and many family and friends, including Clarence and Kathy Pugh from Oregonians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. Now, I got to know Bill through our work together on the 2000 ballot measure, which was called Life for a Life. And the ballot measure, which fell just short of the needed signatures, would have replaced Oregon's death penalty with true life imprisonment. Dr. Bill Connor was chief co-sponsor, along with some other familiar names, Senator Mark Hatfield and former Secretary of State Norma Paulus. And I remember how humble Bill was when dealing with Senator Hatfield. I'd say, well, let's call up Senator Hatfield and ask him to do X. Bill'd say, no, sit down, my son. I'll go see him and I'll ask him in person to do X. I'll make an appointment. I'll put myself in Senator Hatfield's shoes, and he was even kind and considerate with how he dealt with other people's time. Now, Bill and Sonia, his wife since 1969, are a team, and she is an incredibly accomplished registered dietitian and nutritionist in her own right, and was just elected national president of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. Bill and Sonia researched as a team, they presented as a team, and they published as a team. Some of you may even have their best-selling cookbook up on your shelves, the New American Diet Cookbook they published in 1987, and which remains one of the best nutrition cookbooks available today. But Bill and Sonia also served Oregon as a team at places like First United Methodist Church's Goose Hollow Homeless Shelter. The former director of Goose Hollow Shelter, the Reverend Chuck Curry, said, too, that Bill was humble. He said, quote, Dr. Bill Connor was a man of wisdom and compassion who read the Gospels and understood we are called to be better as a people. Reverend Curry says, I witnessed this firsthand as the director of community outreach at Portland's First United Methodist Church when Bill chaired that congregation's church and society committee. From that leadership position, he challenged the church to become more involved in the fight to end homelessness. He demanded that our doors be open to all, including gays and lesbians, and saw the death penalty as an ethically flawed penalty that Christians must challenge. Reverend Curry says, I learned much from Dr. Connor. He was one of Oregon's most well-regarded physicians, but more importantly, he was a faithful Christian who saw the face of God in the least of these and acted with justice and humbleness in his life. Micah 6:8 says, He has told you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God? So many of us who have had the good fortune, to know Bill personally, know that Connor's web was humbly spun across Oregon and captured the hearts of thousands of Oregonians. Dr. Bill Connor is walking now humbly with God. I miss him. Oregon misses him, but his humble servitude lives on in the lives of his family and the thousands, if not millions, of lives his web of love have touched. Please join me in humbly bestowing this body's highest honor on Dr. Bill Connor by voting aye on HCR 6. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Roblin yields his time. Discussion, Senator Steiner-Hayward.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, although I never had the privilege of having the personal relationship with Dr. Connor that our colleague from North and Northeast Portland did, I had the privilege of having a professional relationship and with his wonderful wife since 1991 when I came to Oregon as a freshly minted MD and realized that this was home instead of where I'd grown up. You know, one of the most distinguishing characteristics that always struck me about Bill was that it takes a rare kind of person to be able to do the level of research that he did and still be able to have the kinds of strong patient relationships that he did, and the strong relationships with his colleagues, and to see everybody in every profession vaguely touching healthcare as a partner. Bill was not a man who believed in hierarchy or that the initials after your name said what you could contribute. Bill believed that anybody who cared deeply about improving the health of our community could contribute something and had something that he could learn from, and maybe he could teach them something. I cannot tell you how many times in my practice I recommended their cookbook to my patients. If I had a dime for every one of them, I'd probably be doing a little bit better than I am right now. It's an extraordinary cookbook because it's real. It's not fancy, it's not complicated, it's things that anybody can prepare. And that's an exact representation of the kinds of translational work that Bill Connor and Sonia were doing long before anybody was using translational bench to bedside as those buzzwords that we use today. That cookbook is a representation in many, many ways of who Bill Connor was and the kind of teamwork that he and Sonia did together for so many years and the work that Sonia continues to this day. I was very, very privileged to count Bill as a colleague and somebody I could count on to help me care for my complicated patients and to serve as a resource for the more mundane ones. He is greatly missed in the medical community, as well as in all the communities that were just mentioned to you. And I, as well, urge your enthusiastic aye vote for SCR 6.
Recognize Senator Montes Anderson.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, I attend the United Methodist Church in Gresham, and I had the opportunity to speak at the United Methodist Church in Portland. And I don't even remember what it was for, but this elderly gentleman came up to me and introduced himself, and he said, "I'm Bill Connor." And for the next 45 minutes, he told me how we as a legislature should combat smoking and eliminate smoking, or at least decrease smoking in the state of Oregon. So it wasn't just nutrition. He also had a passion for healthcare, no matter what it was. And I enjoyed, that was the only encounter I had with him, but I certainly remember it to this day. Thank you.
Further discussion? If not, Senator Shields, do you wish to close? He does not. The question now arises upon third reading and final adoption of Senate Concurrent Resolution 6. Those are the opinion the bill should be adopted. Will answer aye. Their names are called. Those opposed, no. The clerk will call the roll.
George. Gerard. Hansel. Hass. Johnson. Knope. Cruz. Bonas Anderson. Monroe. Olson. Przanski. Roblin. Rosenbaum. Shields. Starr. Steiner Hayward. Thompson. Whitsitt. Winters. Bearsugar. Bates. Beyer. Boquist. Burdick. Close. Devlin. Dingfelder. Edwards. Ferrioli. President Courtney. Excused. Edwards. 29 aye votes.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 6, having received a constitutional majority, is declared adopted.